Son, how are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and in love. Good, 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 good morning, son.
And good morning. Cheers. Waiting for some live streaming lag to verify audio. And here we go. Good morning, everyone. I think we're good. Okay. Buenos dias. Cheers. Good evening, Mo. Cheers. Shocker. I have a cold. Ah. Today's coffee is a Salvadoran Toragos from Good Beans El Salvador. Cheers in my latte. Taking it easy this morning. Okay, I think we're working. Let's move on and get into it. December 20th, 2024. I think this will be, I don't know that I'll do another live stream until January 2025. So if I don't, I think I'll be traveling. If I don't, Feliz Año Nuevo. I think that's how you say it. Happy New Year. I'm in the US, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and let's get started. Ask your questions or send a comment. What are you working on? What have you been doing? What interesting Business Central feature are you creating, using, testing, learning about? And I have a question for all of you. I think it was last week. I don't know that it was still continuing this week, but last week I was constantly encountering the working on it message. And, we'd be opening a record, a customer record. We'd be trying to open a list page or whatever. We'd be trying to do the tell me search. And it just would sit there and say working on it. And I'm guessing or interpreting that that's some type of connection timeout, database timeout, or connection loss. And basically you wait 30 seconds and the whole page refreshes and Business Central web client reloads. What is that? What causes that? Can I detect it on telemetry? I would love answers to these questions. I would like to be able to detect this on telemetry, know what caused it in all of my environments and my customers, because I suspect it happens more frequently than any of us might realize. I see it constantly, and I saw it across multiple tenants, multiple environments, multiple users. It was happening during a training session we were doing. So I want to know what causes it and how to identify it. And it was happening too often last week to be acceptable to me. Anyway, if anyone knows, let me know. The weekend, el fin de semana. I finally, after much nagging from my wife, I put up our Christmas lights. That was right before the cold just took me out. So that was a Saturday, I think. I miraculously had the energy to put all those up, just blasted through it, and I didn't get too fancy with any other decorations, but got the lights up. The house is lit up, good enough, did my job. And then the cold hit me Saturday afternoon, evening, and took me out. And so the rest of the weekend, I was just wiped out watching. So I watched the show on Peacock. I don't know if it's available overseas, but in the US, we have a streaming service called Peacock. It's like the NBC Universal, whatever Comcast streaming service. And they have a show that they produce called the Day of the Jackal. Similar, there was a movie called Some Jackal with Bruce Willis years ago. And I think it's based off of an old book. So interesting, very predictable, very rote. Like I recently watched another show with the woman from X Files about this serial killer or something. Like you just substitute certain plot lines and it's very similar. So in that respect, it wasn't too exciting, but it was well done. So I enjoyed it. And the storyline of the Jackal's actually pretty good. So that was my weekend. Not terribly productive other than the Christmas lights. So this week's project, I was sick. My whole family was sick. My kids were sick. And even my wife, who never gets sick, was sick. So it was a family affair of viral proportions. Okay. We had our first request through a partner we work with that I think I mentioned this last week, the customer wanted, apparently wanted the source code for all of their PTEs. Cool, no problem. I always recommend that customers should always have access to or copies of all of their source code that was developed for their specific customizations. And if you have some agreement with a customer where it's like, hey, we're going to develop this for you at a discount and sell it and whatever, or we're not going to charge you, we're going to sell it and it's going to be an app source app, whatever, that's fine. But your generic PTE where you're adding 3 fields to a page, where you're modifying reports, where you're adding a code unit to do some action, whatever, just give the customer the source code. Like, why do you want to hold on to that? So they asked for that. So we packaged that up and we found that we had a mistake in our, I don't know exactly, I'm learning Alpaca. So I don't know if it's in like the Alpaca template we use, but whatever template we use for our new projects, it was based off of our app source app. And so our app source app template naturally had show source code or download source code set to false. So it turns out that all of the PTEs we've been developing for a little while now have had show code or download code false. So we had to go back for all the PTEs for this customer. We had to change that, do a new build, run it through our build pipeline, produce a new release. So we fixed that so the source code's downloadable. Then we downloaded all the source code from DevOps. That was actually quite easy. That was pretty nice. Comes down as a zip. And delivered everything, new releases and all the source code to the partner. We're going to install the new releases in the customer's environment so they can download source. And we'll see what happens. The story is that the customer wants to hire an internal person to manage their Salesforce development and their Business Central development customizations and other IT stuff. Now, I put the odds of that person being non-fictional at about 0.01%. Because, as you may know, dear viewers, to be even remotely competent in Business Central requires a fair amount of investment, focus, and just like understanding what's going on. And I'm trying to do it constantly. My developer is, my team is, everyone is, and it is like running on a treadmill at full speed, just trying to keep up with what's going on and be competent and understanding the complications that can arise. So I would not want to be a person who has been tasked with Salesforce development, Business Central development, and other projects. So I'm going to bet against that role ever occurring. Anyway, ERP support team is jamming. That is the offering from Berlin, El Salvador. That is going to be a full service help desk for Business Central, available to customers, available to partners, and we'll be offering support contracts. And that will allow them to provide help desk services and support services to customers and partners. It'll help the ERP Center of Excellence have a training ground to train them, and we're going to offer some really interesting services there. And in order to support that, go live in January, we have nonstop training. We're doing some accounting basic training, BC navigation and overview, general training, telemetry, page scripting, Power Automate, warehousing, you name it. So we have a busy few weeks ahead. So as I mentioned, I had a cold, but somehow I continued to function during the week, barely 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. on Monday. Not sure how, but yep, I just realized it was 10:30 p.m. on Monday when I finally wrapped up. We did our help desk procedures review. I think Berlin did their own training on that. And SaaS documentation is a mess. And I don't know that's anyone's fault. I'm sure all of you have encountered this, but it is just impossible to keep up with SaaS because the software changes constantly. And there is some poor person who is tasked with doing the documentation. And this came up when we were trying to work in Power Automate. And I asked Ronald to learn about custom connectors in Power Automate. And we go to the documentation and it looks like this. You sign in on the left pane, you go to Data Custom Connectors. That's what I thought. The only problem is now when you log into Power Automate, there is no data page, menu, item, whatever on the left anymore. It does not exist. So we're sitting or poking around, bumbling around, trying to find where this might be. It is moved. It's under a completely different place. You have to expand something, click on something, open a window, add something. It's basically hidden. And I don't know why they buried it 2 levels deep, but you got to find it and then you have to add it back to your menu or pin it or something. So we eventually found it, but all the documentation for the last however many years that was created prior to this UI changed is useless. And so now, like, you can't even find a basic menu item of custom connectors in Power Automate. So it's really frustrating. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we need expiration dates on documentation. I'm not sure. Then we did BC Basic training with the team. Jocelyn and Vanya were doing that. I attended that. We're refining our BC training curriculum and training process. I had then chauffeur duties because it is finals week at my kids' high school. So I got to take them to school. I got to pick one up. And then I had to drop one off, go right back, pick up the other one, drop her off, drop off the friend, drop them to work. It was fun. So I'm just like local Uber to the high school. Then let's see. Evening dev call. We talked about delivering the source code to the partner and customer. We talked about app enhancements and dev procedures. We're working on dev procedures, which is an interesting topic. If you do BCAL development and I came to you as a customer, whatever, and said, can you please hand me your development procedures? What would you be able to deliver? Where's your documentation of your Business Central AL dev procedures? What does that mean? What does that entail? What would you even deliver? So I don't know what all that should encompass, but we are starting to develop it. How do you create a project? What is our file naming convention? What is our object naming convention? What is our standard for object ID ranges? How do we do PTEs versus app source apps? We're documenting that from scratch in excruciating detail. And we're doing that kind of 2 birds, 1 stone, because we are training Franklin on AL development. I want him to understand what the conventions will be when he creates a new VS Code project. So our senior developer is documenting that. And great. So now we have dev procedures that we can use internally, we can use for training, and we can use in case someone says, hey, do you have dev procedures? Yes. Here we go. To the extent we can figure out what that means. So we are working on that. And Dynamics GP bug hunting. After all these years, things get stable in Dynamics GP, and then we start seeing bizarre errors with our ISV solution. And it takes a couple of weeks for us to kind of isolate what's going on. And it seems that one of the recent releases changed something. We don't know when or what changed, but a feature that used to work perfectly fine now no longer works in our ISV solution. So we're now trying to isolate the cause of that and figure out when and where and how we deal with that. So that's been interesting. And it started with one customer reporting this issue, then a second, then a third, then a fourth. I was like, okay, we have a pattern here. We have a cluster. We have an outbreak. Let's isolate this and figure out what's going on. I was able to reproduce the issue on the latest version. And now it's like, okay, what is causing this? Is this a bug? Is this something in our app? Our app didn't change. So I tested on GP. GP works fine isolated. So it's something about how our app is interacting with GP as of a certain version and going forward. There was some type of very minor breaking change. And so we need to figure that out, isolate it, and track it down. So that was an interesting experience and relates to BC as well. But yeah. And please, if anyone understands what this means, I am open to suggestions here. I saw that Let's Encrypt. If you're not familiar with Let's Encrypt, it is a service that encourages people to use SSL by making free SSL certificates. It generally needs to be scripted, or the web server or the appliance or the app or whatever that needs the SSL cert will have the scripts of the feature. You click a button, it grabs an SSL cert, it generates it on the fly, boom, you're done. No dealing with, a CSR, a certificate request, no paying money to a hosting company. It's free, one button click in theory. In reality, it could be much messier, but that's the offer. A fantastic service so that you can have SSL to protect. It's not about identification of you as an entity. It's not whatever that second level cert is for identity verification. Now, I believe the expiration used to be like 90 days for Let's Encrypt, and then you always had to re-up that. They didn't do long-term certs. Not sure entirely what the rationale was for that. I guess in case of a compromise of a cert, you just do regular 90-day rotations. Yeah, 90-day, that's what it says there. I saw this announcement, and this is their big advancement. They are going to now switch to 6-day SSL certs. I don't get it. I could come up with some bizarre, convoluted reason for this, but they don't explain why they are doing this. They make this big announcement as if we'll just be in awe of this brilliant decision, but they don't explain. They say this is a big upgrade for the security of the TLS ecosystem because it minimizes exposure time during a key compromise event. Like, really? How often are key compromises occurring that you have to rotate your SSL cert every 6 days? And you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. How are you having SSL key compromise events that often? Like, I don't get it. Like, we have a fundamental security problem of the SSL cert if you're having to rotate your certs every 6 days, folks. Like, if they can compromise it every 90 days, they can compromise it every 6 days. Just a matter of, putting out a bot that does it more frequently. So, well, the SolarWinds compromise, I remember SolarWinds. I just don't remember, was that a SSL cert? I mean, so if they can rotate the cert every 6 days, I can compromise the cert every 4 days, right? So I'm not entirely sure. They don't explain the mechanics of the threat model they are addressing here. I would want to see a full discussion of this threat model and the mechanics of exactly what they are fixing there. Like, I get that SSL cert rotation and all signing certs, key rotation, all of that is valid, but 6 days, I'm like, I think we have a bigger fundamental problem that is triggering this. Let's talk about the fundamental problem first, and then I might have context for this 6-day thing. So I was kind of puzzled. So it's like, okay, but imagine going from 90 days to 6 days. They're saying, they're very proudly saying that's a big shift. We have to build out all this infrastructure. It's like, okay, maybe we should start to address the problem. And maybe SSL Let's Encrypt should say, we're not going to install a cert because you have a compromised or a poorly configured environment. So, Anyway, oh, okay. So Ted says if a cert was compromised and you patch the hole, you now need to expire the cert. Okay, so there's CSR or there's certificate revocation things, and that certificate revocation has been, I believe, an unmitigated failure because no one is paying attention to the certificate revocation lists because just there are thousands and thousands of revoked certificates, including when the certificate authority gets compromised. So anyway, I wish they would just better explain the threat model that they're trying to solve there. And Tuesday, Martes, more Dynamics GP testing, trying to track down the issue that we're having. I had a call with an AppSource app prospect. So we have a couple of AppSource apps. Someone saw our listing and had some questions. So I had a call with them to learn more about their industry. And it was fascinating. They do things completely different, like absolutely different than our other customers. Our other customers have data flowing this way into Business Central. This customer wants data flowing from Business Central to their operational systems. I'm like, I'm not sure that that's the norm of your industry. I need to talk to the other players to see if this would be worthwhile. It basically is like, hey, can you have your app go the other direction? I'm like, if no one else in your industry does this, I don't know that it's worth our time. So I need to figure that out. So it is fascinating to see that, a customer comes to you and says, oh, this is how we do things. Great. And you kind of have a reference and you think that's how things are done. Another customer comes to you with a completely different story that's opposite. You're like, wait, how do I reconcile this? So really fascinating, same industry, but very, very messy how their integrations operate. Continued work on the dev procedure doc. I believe that got delivered on Tuesday, so Franklin's digging into that. And then while working with, I forget who I was working with. We looked at the BC API documentation. Oh, I was working with Franklin discussing Business Central APIs. And I pull up the documentation. I say, oh, here's why you might want to write a custom API because this field is missing. So I pulled up a customer arbitrarily and said, okay, let's look at the customer resource type. Let's look at the customer payload and let's find a field that is not present in this payload. And I said, okay, salesperson ID, salesperson code, salesperson name, whatever. Salesperson is not in this payload. Great. So Franklin, you would go into Stefan Marone's BC code history repository, find this customer's API page, and you will notice that salesperson is not present in the code, except it is. Salesperson code is part of the customer API page in Business Central. So I'm looking at the AL code, I'm looking at this payload, and I'm saying, what is going on? Like, this is wrong. And I've been relying upon this page. I've been on calls with customers saying, yes, this field is here. No, this field is not here. Yes, you need to do a custom API. And I'm just staring at this, like trying to figure out what I'm missing. And then I just happened to look up at the note above this payload. And I am in disbelief. The response object shown here may be truncated for brevity. All of the properties will be returned from an actual call. What? So this is an arbitrary list of random fields that will be delivered in the JSON payload for a customer. It is not a complete list. They have just randomly removed some fields. Why? The effort required to remove 4 lines from this JSON payload on a web page for brevity? Who is the audience who wants brevity on API payload documentation? I was absolutely speechless. And after being just baffled by what this is, I kept digging. And I found what I think is the unexplainable pattern for this. If you go to the customer entity in the API documentation, it appears, no guarantee on this, but on the customer, it appears you get the full payload. There is no note about brevity and truncation. But if you click on any of the HTTP verbs, get, delete, create, update, at least on the get, it is truncated for brevity. They literally saved 4 lines on an electronic web page. Someone, for some reason, chose 4 random fields to remove from the payload. Folks, I do not understand. Like, someone not only had to remove the lines for brevity, like, are they really saving space? Someone had to put this note here to warn you that it is truncated. Help me understand, please. It was painful. Okay, moving on. CISA Secure Cloud Platforms, relevant to all of us if you are in the Microsoft ecosystem. CISA is some U.S. government organization, one of 6 billion U.S. departments that has some ungodly budget, but they appear to occasionally do something useful. So CISA orders federal agencies to secure Microsoft 365 tenants. And this may or may not be related to one of the compromises and nation-state attacks against Microsoft, where through an unbelievably mind-blowing 16-step multi-year compromise, they were able to access the source code and compromise an invalid certificate in the Microsoft testing infrastructure to then leverage that to get access to Office 365 email accounts for government and employees and politicians in the US. I'm guessing that was the motivation. CISA orders federal agencies to secure Microsoft 365 tenants. And you may say, orders federal agencies to secure them how? Like, what does that even mean? Fortunately, they finally offered some value here with what is called a BOD. No idea what a BOD, I forgot what that stands for. Something, 2501, implementing secure practices for cloud services required configurations. Horrible name, whatever, but secure practices, I'm on board. So if you keep digging into these BODs, whatever this is, and I have QR codes for the Bleeping Computer article, which has a reference. Highly recommend visiting that site. Read the article. I highly recommend looking at the CISA BOD. You will see there is an actual step-by-step guideline for how to secure your Microsoft 365 environment. Ted found it. Binding Operational Directive. Whatever that means, government speak, okay? There is some other word, I think they call it a SCUBA. You're about to see, it's like a SCUBA, really? Government acronyms. So it's a CISA BOD SCUBA. How's that for a Friday morning acronym fest? So you can then go to this list, you expand each of those Microsoft services, and it offers a rather extensive hardening guide. I am going to have our junior cybersecurity intern in Berlin try to go through every single one of these for our environments. It is mind-numbingly boring, staggeringly tedious, but if you read these, it's like, this is good stuff. This is for me, a holy grail checklist of actionable items to properly secure your environment. And some of these things may be default, but some of these are not, I know for a fact. So good recommendations as far as I could tell. The only caveat you will need to be careful with any security or lockdown or hardening guidelines is you may flip one of these switches and lock all of your users out. Or you may flip one switch and lock out all users outside the United States, right? or maybe you'll lock out anyone without the proper MFA. So you need to be careful with this. Same goes with endpoint protection and antivirus. You can literally shut down all of your endpoints if you're not careful. So be careful, be prudent, and like cautiously enable these gradually and see what breaks. But so for instance, phishing resistant MFA shall be enforced for all users. Last week, I talked about the attack on the Azure TOTP 6-digit code authentication. So that is MFA, and you may think, oh, I'm secure with MFA, but you're not, because it isn't necessarily using the number matching phishing resistant MFA. So this is the motherload checklist for Microsoft 365. I don't know that it fully includes all the Azure infrastructure, but it's a starting point. If you're a small business, small IT team, you don't have a dedicated internal security officer, here you go, folks. And it's not going to be fun. It's going to be weeks of work, but at least it's out there. So our junior intern's going to jump on it, and we're just going to plod through it step by step. And I'll try to get on top of it. But yeah, so highly recommend it. Awesome resource. Go at it, folks. Lock it down, secure yourself. You are not immune from these attacks, especially if you're a Microsoft partner. You are just the juiciest target that any attacker can have. And I mentioned last week that I got the ransom letter from someone that attacked some company and accidentally CC'd me, happening every single day of the week. The healthcare organization here that I go to is still unable to do any medical records, any appointment scheduling. This is 3 weeks now that they have been down due to a cyber attack and ransomware attack. So real deal, folks. eBay cell phones. I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I picked up a cell phone off of eBay because I needed a phone for El Salvador for a Salvadoran phone number and to deal with the stuff I need to deal with there. So I said, okay, let me just get a second phone so I'm not having to fight with my carrier phone. Picked up an iPhone 15, the cheapest one I could find. I love it. Perfect condition. I finally found there's a little scratch on the glass by the camera. I don't care. Whatever, it was $500. Awesome deal. Works perfectly flawless. So I then said, I think I'm onto something. I am going to stop buying carrier phones. I don't care what their discount is. That mine now locks me into a 36-month payment process in order to get the full discount because they string out that discount over 36 months. If I want a new phone, if I want to cancel, whatever, I basically have to pay it off and I lose the remaining discount. Plus, I got to buy insurance on the phones, whatever. So I picked up a second eBay refurbished iPhone 15, and this is a 256 gig model. Checked my storage and I wanted 256 for my real phone. So this is the iPhone 15, not the Pro, not the XL, whatever. And $580, $55 tax, $635. Like compared to a brand new one, great deal. Fully unlocked, eBay refurbished, certified with a 1-year warranty. And it is absolutely flawless. Not a scuff, fingerprint, scratch. You can't even tell that it has been touched. It's like fully like an Apple refurbished as far as I could tell. It came with some third-party box. So I don't know who is doing this. I don't know what they're doing. Now, mine came with a manufacture date of August 2024 and a battery cycle count of 0. So I don't know if the battery was replaced. I don't know if this was repaired. No idea what the history of this phone was, but as far as I could tell, it's fine. If there's a problem, I'll return it. If there's a problem later, I'll do the warranty. Whatever, $600. Business expense, like it works. So I'm going to migrate over to this. This one uses an eSIM. So I got to figure out how I switch from a physical SIM from my carrier to the eSIM and what hassles that presents. But I'm done with carrier phones. And as soon as my family gets off of their iPhone 15s, which are now 12 months old, they paid full price for them, and we got to ride that out for 36 months. What a hassle. This thing is perfect. Screen is perfect. The touch is perfect, display is perfect. As far as I can tell, the camera's fine. I'm not that picky on camera, but I'll find out if the 15 versus the Pro is any different. And the back is flawless. And it's 1 ounce lighter than the Pro. So I'm loving that. I'll take the lightweight over the features of the Pro. So far so good. Just like my eBay Lenovo ThinkPad experience, the cell phone experience has been great. Wednesday, miércoles, we worked on designing Business Central support plans. That is for our ERP support team project. And so Tanya and I talked about that. We had calls with partners, and we're structuring subscriptions for Business Central support desk. So if a customer or partner wants to just outsource BC support, if they want to be partially involved, minimally involved, whatever, that's what we're going to offer. So that's what we're working on. I had a call with Jocelyn to brainstorm about how we're going to use page scripting internally with our support plans, with our consulting, all sorts of ideas there. DynamicsCon 2025, we had a Business Central Planning Committee meeting. I think we have roughly 66 Business Central sessions over 6 rooms. So if you are available to come to Chicago, make plans for the 2025 DynamicsCon in Chicago. We're going to have a ton of content. There's going to be BC sessions. We're trying to figure out if we do like tracks, like a finance track, a reporting track, I don't know. But there are also going to be cross-product sessions for Business Central Power Automate, maybe Business Central Power BI. We're not sure exactly what those cross products are. And we are working on a BC technical track to have at least 11 technical or dev related sessions. There's technical and then there's dev, and we're trying to figure out what that means, but we're trying to get a kind of a consistent, cohesive track for technical. And it'll probably be more on the beginner side, like your first extension, AL, DevOps, whatever that looks like. That's kind of like what we're thinking here. Getting into BC development, probably not super advanced topics for those 11, but we'll see. We're trying to figure it out. Maybe it'll be a graduation from beginner up to intermediate topics. Open to suggestions. Hit me up and let me know what you think. So that was a busy day. Upcoming events, próximos eventos. Color Cloud in Hamburg in April, DynamicsCon in Chicago, May 13th. Register for it, dynamicscon.com. And I think early bird pricing is going on. Ted says, implementing Scuba for BC. Interesting. Yeah, it's a good question. As I was reading that, I was wondering, do we have best practices for security for BC, or does it just get handled by the greater umbrella of Microsoft 365 and Azure? I know there are a few bad practices you could have, like super access across all companies for multiple users. And then there is API access. You could have that poorly configured or not least permission or not least access oriented. So there is that. I suspect that would be a very, very niche session, but yeah, maybe something we could talk about, but interesting concept. So Ted, hit me up if you're interested in co-presenting on something. And then Dynamics Minds in May in Slovenia. If you are in Europe or if you are interested in heading over to Europe in May, I hear that is a beautiful conference. I do not know that I have the energy or the money to attend that, but I know several people who are going. Tanya and Shannon will likely go. I believe Jeremy goes. Yeah, it's a popular conference, so check it out. Thursday, Jueves, Business Central Fixed Assets Customization. I had a call with Alyssa. We have a customer who says, we want to see these fields on the Business Central Fixed Assets list page. Okay. So we tried to find the fields. We couldn't find them. We wanted to find the asset acquisition date and the asset acquisition cost, I believe. Well, I've never used Business Central Fixed Assets, and Alyssa has used it a little bit, but she's not Like she didn't happen to know where those fields were, so we had to learn. So we're on a call, and I learned that Business Central fixed assets is completely different in this respect than Dynamics GP fixed assets. Now, it has been about 5,000 years since I have worked on Dynamics GP fixed assets, but I was pretty sure that in GP, we had a fixed asset acquisition date and a fixed asset acquisition cost. We had those fields on the fixed asset card. We're looking at the fixed asset card in BC and like, where is it? We don't see it. It's because it's not there, as far as I could tell. You have to fill out your fixed asset card, then you have to click on the acquire button. And only then do you do the fixed asset acquisition wizard. That's one approach to do it. Excuse me. And on this wizard, it confusingly, I believe, it confusingly uses acquisition cost and acquisition date field captions. Lo siento. Sorry about that. So, why is this confusing? I find it confusing because, as far as I can tell, you will not find acquisition cost or acquisition date fields anywhere else in the Business Central fixed asset module or anywhere else. As far as I could tell, this creates a fixed asset journal that then posts, and that is what records the FA posting date. Jeez. That's what records the FA posting date, aka acquisition date, and acquisition cost, which is the amount of that FA journal. So, in GP land, that was simpler. We just had an acquisition date, acquisition cost field on the asset. Now, I can kind of rationalize the accounting aspect of posting an FA journal to record that acquisition. Kind of makes sense. It kind of seems a little more proper in that you're actually booking that as a transaction to the subledger. So I could get on board with that, but like it's not intuitive if that's the first time you're looking at it. Let me just tell you. So yeah, that was interesting. We learned something about fixed assets. I learned, Alyssa learned, and now the Berlin team is going to learn about fixed assets. And as you may know, I am an enjoyer of the YouTube algorithm. And Ted says you could use a PO to purchase the fixed asset. Excellent point. We could do the same thing in Dynamics GP. Your purchase transaction to acquire a fixed asset could trigger the asset creation in GP. I don't remember if GP does any type of subledger journal behind the scenes on acquisition or creating that, but it's a good point. Yes, I will have to explore all the avenues of fixed assets in BC. It's literally the first time I'd ever opened any of the windows, and it had no record, so I had to start from scratch. But fortunately, fixed assets is pretty simple in concept, but a little nuance, just like the PO to purchase. Good point, Ted. So I am an enjoyer of the YouTube algorithm. I get all sorts of just random stuff in my feed, such as why point shoes cost the New York City Ballet nearly $1 million a year. And I look at that like, okay, you have me. You got me. I'm going to watch it. This is a 20-minute excellent video, not talking about the top ballet dancers in the world, not talking about the ballet industry, the ecosystem, whatever. They are talking about the point shoes that ballet dancers use. Absolutely fascinating. And aside from the just bonkers economics and how anyone survives and just the volumes that they do, everything is handmade, and just crazy details of this industry that you're just like, what? How is this possible? what I found fascinating is what the topic of the slide says. All this stuff, what I cared about is that these ballet dancers were the absolute top performers in the world. And I enjoy watching the best performers in the world, whatever it is. If it's, millennial farmer showing how he operates his small farm, if it is ballet dancers showing how they modify, customize, tear up, destroy, and break in their point shoes. It wasn't about the ballet. It wasn't about the point shoe industry. It was what happens when this shoe gets into the hands of a top 1% performer and what they like to do in order to customize their shoe in order to allow them to compete and perform at their absolute best. And you're like, really? 2 more stitches in the elastic band that you put on your shoe? The little padding at the heel, you cut out 1 layer of leather in the sole, but only in the heel section. You bang the toe against the wall before you perform in order to get just the right level of break-in. Like, the attention to the level of detail that they go to in order to perform at that level is fascinating. If anyone watches Formula One, kind of similar themes there, but the driver is often not in control of every component on the car, right? They're kind of just a passenger, no pun intended, of what their team can understand of their lingo and how they can adjust the car and read telemetry and help the driver adapt. But here you're seeing the dancer make the adjustments themselves in order to get exactly what they want, and how picky, how absolutely demanding they are about every stitch in their shoe. Truly fascinating piece if you watch it from that perspective. Okay, and Friday, Viernes, well, Berlin training had to be rescheduled because Jocelyn was sick and Ronald was out, like life intervened. So we are pivoting and they are doing a couple of independent projects. And welcome, Buenos Dias, to the live stream. And later on, I will have a call with Franklin to discuss the BCAL dev procedures that we're developing, along with Alpaca procedures that Dave, our senior developer, has already created. And yeah, and a Friday cautionary tale. I just got this very, very, very scary email in my inbox. And it was a warning that one of my environments, my Business Central environment, is scheduled for update in January 2022. And normally I don't freak out over these things, and it's like, whatever. In this case, I am concerned. Notice the available version is 25.2. Well, I won't share details, but I've been paying attention to observations and reports of 25.2. And I highly, highly recommend pushing that update out as long as possible. And so I sent a message to the Berlin team as soon as I saw this, and I said, push as far as possible. Push it as late as possible. 3 minutes later, David responded, done. So awesome team, know exactly what to do. We are pushing out all of our sandboxes, all of our demo environments, all of our internal environments, and I need to have a meeting with our team to see how we push out all our customers. I do not want to see 25.2 anytime soon. It is quite bad. The bugs are unacceptable in my opinion. I don't know how it got out the door. I don't know how many of those bugs have been fixed already with whatever release this is, like whichever incremental 25.2 this is, but I do not want to find out. We're already dealing with the bugs from 24.5 to 25.1. So I highly recommend pushing 25.2 out to August 31st or whatever your tolerance level is for that. So that appears to be the latest date that we can currently push 25.2. That's what we are doing across every single environment that we have access to. and we will have to figure out how we do that with customers. We don't yet have an automated solution to push these out. We are working on building one to automatically push out updates whenever we want. So, buen provecho. The excellence update. Good morning, Berlin team, if you're watching. They'll have a good laugh because the Berlin team, the ERP Center of Excellence team, went to a photo shoot and they got headshots. And there's a very funny story behind this that they are all laughing about right now. But in any event, they got some headshots done at a photo studio in Berlin, El Salvador, wearing their crisp, clean, fancy ERP Center of Excellence logo polo shirts. And there they are, folks. That is the team. We have David, Jocelyn, Ronald, Franklin, and Joel. And this week, they worked on BC support ticket training for the ERP support team, Business Central training, page scripting, telemetry, digging in inventory and warehousing, AL development training, and of course, as I mentioned, AL development procedures. So congratulations to the team. You guys are doing awesome. And yeah, I know they're getting a kick out of their photos. They're very self-conscious. But I think they look great. Nice, fancy shirts. Look at that. What a team. Bright, smiley people. Yes. So anyway, it has been a great year. Pretty much, it's been 13 months since I first arrived in Berlin, El Salvador. 13 months. Went from knowing I didn't know a single person, and now we've built an amazing team that is becoming Business Central experts. So there we go. Look at those shiny faces. So Q&A. What are you doing for your vacation? Any holiday plans? And of course, the usual, que tengas un buen fin de semana. Have a great weekend, but also Feliz Navidad, Feliz Año Nuevo, I think. Yeah, have a great holidays. And let's see. Last night, I noticed this pop up on my YouTube feed, and I was tired, still had a cold, so I started watching it. And really fantastic movie. However, this free version on YouTube is the horribly, horribly edited and made for TV edited version where they dubbed out all the bad words. It makes it nonsensical. Like, it was so bad, I had to go to Amazon Prime and just buy the movie. I think it was only $4.50 to buy the movie, so I bought it. And so I'm going to I watched half of it last night. I'm going to watch the rest. Really fantastic movie. I vividly remember living through that process because my friends and I were all talking about this. What is going on? I'm in Southern California, and we watched the housing market just explode and go haywire, and we didn't understand what was going on, just like many of the people in this movie. And we were baffled. And once the details came out, we started to understand the mechanics, and I watched this unfold in real time in 2007, 2008. And I had friends that were actually able to invest in these shorts of the CDOs. And as the banks started to fail, they had to scramble to pull their money out to actually get the reward. Otherwise, they would have lost everything in the bankruptcy. So crazy, crazy time. Phenomenal movie. And yep, like they took some artistic liberties with the events, but very accurate. Yep, that's exactly what happened. And also, yesterday, I cleaned up what I call my Spanish flashcard phrase and word list. I have 1,040 phrases and words in an Excel file that I then printed. I also pulled it into an app called Quizlet, and that will be my holiday exercise to practice these words. So pretty much that's the set of words that I need to practice for my level that I can comprehend. and I need to memorize these basically. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the holidays. Cuando, donde, porque, que, estoy, soy, adios, largo día de trabajo. So that's what I'm going to be working on. My español. Okay, with that, happy holidays. Learn something in Business Central. Hope you're doing good. Have a good Christmas, Happy New Year, whatever, and enjoy. Okay, adios. Nos vemos. Talk to you later.
Do-do-do-do.